Well, welcome back to another episode of The Miles Driven. This time we are doing luxury cars and a few caveats to start off with. I've tried to limit the number of SUVs because, as we know, over the last decade, luxury cars, SUVs, they've kind of merged. But all the big luxury saloons, sedans, even some sort of sports car-ish saloons, they're still there. They're still on the market. And if anything, these are the places to get bargains. So at the end of this, you're going to see that there is one car on this list. 83% of its entire value is gone after just 7 years. 7 years. And like normal mileage as well. I didn't go looking around and trying to find some, astonishing mileage. All of the data I've put in for this are based on average mileage. And so we're going to kick off with a Lexus because this particular Lexus, which is the LS model, it loses over half of its value after 8 years. However, it's only 55%, and that's in Europe, in the UK, in the USA, aggregated across them all, 55%. It's one of those cars, it's a big car. I based the majority of the search, because this is the one that people seem to buy, is the 500H, so the 500 hybrid, self-charging hybrid. It will just run, maximize the efficiency of the engine. The Takumi and the luxury spec, some of you won't get one, some of you won't get the other. Those are the ones that sort of stood out to me. So those are, from a point of view of Lexus, if you really like Japanese stuff, that's the one to buy. But the next one, it had to come onto this list. I was actually trying to save this one for another list we're going to do, which is EVs, but it's just too good of a bargain. And it's not even 8 years old. The Porsche Taycan. There is no way that the Porsche Taycan can not make this list. 60% in the UK. 65% in the USA. In Europe, it was a bit interesting. Some countries, I'm finding that the depreciation was about the same. Others, a little bit better. Others, a little bit worse. I think this is really, the Taycan's gone through a really interesting time for depreciation, where I would say early this year, late last year, the Taycan, it hit loads of headlines for bad depreciation, a few owners reporting battery issues, and it just hit the market really hard. And at the exact same time, a lot of people that had these cars, sort of 3 years old, 4 years old, on a lease or company agreement, they were getting rid of them. And it just all happened at the wrong time for the Porsche Taycan. But it meant if you were in the used market, you got an absolute bargain. And since then, prices have solidified a little bit. Now, I think partly that's because ultimately, if there's any company that's really going to stand behind any warranty they put, and bear in mind, Porsche give you an 8-year battery warranty on these cars, it's Porsche. They're one of those brands that you call up and say, I've got a 50-year-old 911 or one of the other sort of sports cars. I'm trying to find a part for it. They'll get you a part. And so people have, I would say, if you're trying to play the safe bet on an EV, yes, this is not a cheap car, but with way over 60% of its value wiped off of it, it's a hell of a deal. And bearing in mind that as long as you can charge at home or charge somewhere cheaply, it's going to be one of the cheapest to run out of all of these cars. So the Taycan had to make the list. It's second place. So, actually, when you think of this, we're going to keep going down and down and down. That's not bad from a point of view of how much it's lost. However, there is one caveat, and that is that, of course, it's not 8 years old. A lot of these were for sale 8 years ago. And so the Taycan actually becomes one of the worst depreciating cars when we sort of project what it's going to be like when it hits the 8-year mark. And the 8-year mark is actually quite worrying for the Taycan, because that's when, for a lot of them, they'll fall outside of the battery warranty. And if you can't get a good extended warranty on them, then it's going to be a bit of a risky purchase, I think. If you're buying it 4 years old and you're planning to keep until 8 years old. Now, if you're planning to buy it 5 years old and just keep the thing, take your bargain and run with it. But, there's a little bit at play there. So next we move on to, let's call it the safe bet, but not for the reasons you may think. I threw this one in here because I thought it was a good curveball. There is a buyer's guide, by the way, for the Taycan and for this car, which is the Volvo S90. This is sort of the luxury car of Volvo. It's the big saloon that they do. Of course, the XC90 and the S90, even the V90 are on the same chassis, but the S90 is the one that they kind of tried to sort of scope out the market and say, look, if you're looking for the big German cars, why don't you come have a look at our S90? Now, depreciation-wise, UK, about 62%. USA, 70%. So some real bargains, bearing in mind the current generation S90. You'll be able to buy the early ones of these at that level of depreciation. Now in Europe, mixed. I'd say if you're looking sort of Central European countries, Germany and or sort of into Western Europe, France, and Northern Europe, it's a little bit stronger, a little bit stronger. Outside of that, though, a little bit weaker. So if safety is number one on your list, but more importantly, if you're saying to yourself, well, I want a luxury car, but I don't really want a badge that everyone's going to know is supposed to be something that's a bit special. Volvo, for most people, people just think of, people driving their estate car off to soccer practice or football practice. But it doesn't have the association that maybe a Mercedes badge or a Rolls-Royce badge would have. And so if you're out there and you think, "God, I really like a luxury car, but I don't want everyone to know about it," that might be the pick. Now, the next one, this is no doubt a sports car, but it's the saloon model. And I just had to add it in because, again, it's one of those badges where I thought, you know what? Yeah, I could pick an SUV, and yeah, sure, the SUV that this company makes has had some severe depreciation, but I think this is actually a better pick. Now, you can't really get one 8 years old. They did stop making them. You might be able to just get one of the last ones, but it's the Aston Martin Rapide, okay? And they did a Rapide S as well. Now, up to about 2019, that was the very, very last of them. Really, I found lots in sort of the 2016. That's where you'll see most of these. 70% depreciation. That's the sort of the newest ones you can get. That's the UK. USA, funny enough, they were actually a little bit stronger. So about 65% of their brand new price to used price. That's a good level of depreciation. 65% gone. At the end of it, you've got a car that is pretty much unrepeatable. I don't think we're going to see a V12 super saloon that is not, $300,000-400,000. We're just not in that world anymore. And with batteries and plug-ins and hybrids and electric, it's very unlikely any manufacturer is going to go to the colossal effort that it would need to get a V12 past all of the emissions regulations in a brand new super saloon. Now, the next one, not going to get this in the UK. I don't know if you can get it in Europe actually either. I can't remember from the research, but it's the Genesis G90. And I'm throwing this in here because in the USA, you can now get these for 75% off. And while it doesn't necessarily have the cachet of a Mercedes badge, they just had so much, made them such great value, even when they were new, but no one really bought them. And the people that did buy them struggled to sell them. So 75% in the US, that is nearly 10% a year of its money wiped off. And realistically, after the first 3 years, it probably had 50%, which actually showed me a slightly positive about something like a Genesis, which is that people, as they get older, they become almost like a bit of an enthusiast car, i.e. you have to understand what's underneath them. And people have a little bit more faith in these cars that they're sort of familiar with the engine, familiar with the idea of, oh, actually, while some of the electronics and some of the more advanced things that were put in there to make it a luxury car may have some maintenance issues, the actual running gear should be fairly reliable. And so it does kind of hit a basement value where after that, it doesn't depreciate so much. So I quite like that with the Genesis. But of course, the Germans had to come into this. And I think now we step into the heavier depreciation sector, it's a fairly easy guess where we're going. I think we're going to Germany and we're going to Britain. But the one to start us off as we really step down now in some heavy depreciation, the BMW 7 Series, particularly the G11 and the G12. Now, there is a buyer's guide for this vehicle on the channel. The interesting thing for this one for me is that the depreciation depends on engine in Europe, not so much in the US. So we're looking around 68% depreciation from brand new to 8 years old in Europe, okay? In the US, about 76%. So you can get an absolute bargain of one of these in the US. And I think the reason they're holding value slightly stronger in the UK and across Europe is that you can get them with the diesel engines, which you can't get so much now. Really, a lot of these cars have moved to plug-in hybrid. But on this generation, on this age, you can still get yourself something like a 740 diesel. And a 740 diesel that's 8 years old. I remember actually, if I go back to when I sold cars years and years and years ago, not the previous generation, but the generation before that, that had, say, 730 diesel. Did they have 745 diesel? I think was the V8 diesel. They always sold quickly. They were bargains to buy. We were selling them 3, 4 years old, sometimes 2 years old, and they just had half their value wiped off. And you'd have someone come in and be like, hold on a minute, that can't be the right price on that car. I know that car is a near six-figure car. So how is it, £35,000? Like, well, because it's had its depreciation. And a lot of them did have quite a bit of mileage on them. But a diesel engine with 65,000 miles on it should really concern no one unless it hasn't been maintained, especially these sort of straight six engines, even the V8 diesels. You can ignore everything that's going on in the car world for the next 5 to 10 years and just enjoy the luxury that we had. Because really, I'm telling you, I've stepped in a 2025, 2024 brand new luxury cars, and you step back in this generation and you think, yeah, I can see what we're doing now. I can see what we're doing. Everything's had to go more screens and jazzy and tech filled. But there's something really classy about this generation. And you're going to find that as we go through the list. But the next one is still a pricey option to go for, but its depreciation meant it could not make this list. It's the Bentley Bentayga. So this is the first SUV to go on the list. I just couldn't. I was actually thinking of putting this on the SUV list, and I was like, no, this has to go in the luxury car, because the luxury car video, 69% in the UK, 71% in the USA. You can get them with a W12 engine. But most interestingly, if you're in Europe, particularly the UK, you can get these 8 years old. Now, because of how the models have changed, you'll know that you're not going to get the latest version looking, but really, I don't think most people are going to bring you up on that. But you can get it with the 4-litre diesel engine. And again, these with the 4-litre diesel, there's a few people within the Volkswagen group, in some of the sort of Audi, Porsche, Bentley brands, that have said that 4-litre engine, when they got hold of it, they knew they had to do something special with it, but they didn't realise how special of an engine they were actually getting in the first place. Now, for most people, Bentleys and diesel doesn't really go together. And so for that, you have the V8 and you have the W12. But if you want a luxury car that shouldn't really give you the luxury car running bills, because let's face it, if you go for a W12, its fuel economy, its servicing and its repairs, they are still as if you've bought a £150,000 or dollar car, okay? And in the US particularly, I think these were over $200,000. But if you can get a diesel one in the UK, that's a familiar engine. It's in Audis, it's in Porsche, it's in some Volkswagens. If you go to a Volkswagen specialist and they can take care of it, yes, if other things break, it's going to be expensive, but 70% off its brand new price. You got something, you parked a Bentley on your driveway. I think for most of you watching, you think, no, Bentleys, that's in the stratosphere. I'm not spending hundreds of thousands on a car. Well, these aren't that anymore, but they are still quite expensive. They are one of the more expensive cars on this entire list. So you're still paying a lot of money relative to the other cars, but for a bargain from this top price to down here, that was one of the standouts. Now, the next car on the list, you couldn't do this list without. It is the definition of the luxury super saloon. It's the Mercedes S-Class. There is no way I could have done this video without the Mercedes S-Class. It is the standout of, if you say, I'm looking for a luxury big saloon, everything really rotates around the Mercedes S-Class. It was the one that essentially, from its heritage and from its predecessors, kind of invented this, not Rolls-Royce end, but just below it. Now, with the W222 generation, there is buyer's guides on the channel. You can go for either the diesel if you're in Europe or the petrol in the US. Europe, you get much more of a mix than we do in the UK. But even so, in the in the UK, 70%. 70% is wiped off its value in the first 8 years with reasonable mileage. In the US, I think because it's petrol engines, I think also a lot of people are doing mileage in them. 78%. Just a huge chunk of money is gone. 80% nearly of its value after 8 years. And the interesting thing for me is when I had a quick look at what they're like 7 years, the numbers are fairly similar. So I think At around the 6-7 year mark, these super saloon S classes, it doesn't really matter if you go long wheelbase, regular wheelbase, they've got this colossal deep dive, and then they're starting to just edge out and find their floor. So if you buy one, and you can buy one well kept, you're going to need, in any of these cars, you need to keep a fund for maintaining it. But if you keep it well, and you keep it for 3 years, with a few exceptions like the Taycan, you should be able to get reasonable money out of it. Now, of course, some of you will be thinking, well, I'm going to keep it forever anyway, and that's fine. But for those of you thinking, yeah, I just want to keep it for 3 years, there seems to be a bit of a sweet spot on the S-Class. So it's not the case with all of these, but on the S-Class particularly. Now, the next car, now we step into what is British luxury. The Jaguar XJ. Yeah, the Jaguar XJ is gone. Very sad that it's gone, but in many ways sort of happy if I see where Jaguar are taking cars today. Maybe they'll bring something fantastic for a future iteration of the XJ, but the XJ of this era, now there's the buyer's guide on the channel, and we give it a farewell on the channel at the very end of that buyer's guide, because the XJ sort of epitomised what the S-Class did, but it just added a little bit of charm. I think the S-Class comes in with this sort of brutish luxury, okay? It's a fantastic car. It's quite imposing. There's a reason why world leaders like to go around in sort of stretch S-Classes or Pullman versions of the S-Class. But at the time, the British government actually used the XJ. It just oozes that little bit of class. It's sort of the thinking person's, in some ways, luxury car. In other ways, not so much, because ultimately, these are, and it's probably seen in the residual values, they're not as reliable as some of the Germans. Now, they're not especially worse, if I'm honest. A lot of people will say, oh, the Jaguar, that will be the one that breaks. Actually, if you look, and there's buyer's guides for the 7 Series, for the S-Class, and for the XJ, you'll see they all have their similar problems. Some have problems in one way, some have problems in another. The XJ had the 3-litre diesel engine, which in Jaguars doesn't seem to cause as much problem as in Land Rovers. But the petrols, you can get a supercharged 5-litre. And honestly, I think if we look back on this era of luxury cars in 20, 30 years, the idea of smoking around in a V8 supercharged Jaguar XJ will be something that stands out in the memory. Because while a lot of these other cars, the 7 Series and the S-Class and the Audi A8, and the other competitors that we'll go through, they all have sort of stuck to the same formula. Turbocharging petrols, turbocharged diesels, hybrids. Jaguar tried to do things a bit differently. And a supercharged V8 just has got something, I don't know, it almost harks back nearly 100 years. There's something that when you get in one of these, you think, yeah, it's almost like the Great Gatsby era for the US, or we'd have to go a long, long way back for the British version of that. But, that's sort of 1900s in the UK. Just something rich about them. Really, really sad that car's gone. But 72% value wiped off. And that's an 8-year-old one. So that's one of the later ones where a lot of the early issues are gone. In the US, 78%. So nearly 80%. I found a few that were a bit higher mileage that had 80% of their value wiped off. So you can find them with a little bit less depreciation if they're particularly low mileage. But to be honest, I'd look for an average mileage one. If I wasn't going to do the mileage, I'd try and get myself a supercharged one, particularly a nice long wheelbase one as well. But I say there's a buyer's guide for that car if you want to check it out. Now, the next car. This one almost didn't make the list. There was a sort of an umming and ahhing and trying to think of whether it should go as maybe a joker, as a sort of last in the pack. But ultimately, I think it deserves to be here. And it's the Audi A8. Now, Volkswagen did have the Phaeton for a short period of time, but we're going a bit too far back. I wanted to stick around the 8-year marker. And the Audi A8, I think over its last, let's say 20 years, it's been going for longer than that, but I think around that era, if you watch the Transporter movies with Jason Statham, sort of 2005, that's where the Audi A8 said, we want to be taken seriously now. We want those 7 Series, those S-Class buyers to come into Audi dealerships and seriously consider us. There's 2 things going on. I think still there's a little bit of a perception issue because in the UK, we're looking at a 70% drop from new in their brand new to their used value after 8 years. But I think that 70% could be weaker. It's just that they're mainly sold here with diesel engines, and everyone knows that, at a certain point, if an A8 is so cheap that it's cheaper than a A6 or even an A4, and it has one of those great 3-litre diesel engines in it, you might as well go for the big car and let it last forever. In the US, though, because the majority are sold with the petrol engine, it's 80% depreciation. And that just makes it unable to ignore the idea you can have an 8-year-old Audi A8, something that still has the right badge for the car park if that's important to you, but most critically, inside still feels like a proper luxury vehicle. And you're going to get it for 80% off. Even in Europe, the values are still pretty poor. I was really surprised. I thought the A8 would be up on this list. Didn't think it would be up there with the Lexus, but maybe around the sort of Volvo money, that would be where you'd be looking at from depreciation levels. But no, people, for whatever reason, they don't really want the used A8. And I think that means if you're out there and you're saying, I like the 7 Series, I like the S-Class, the Jag's great, whatever else. But you know what? I really want a bargain. I think the A8 on the entire list is probably the sort of quiet, almost secret bargain, because if you pull up in it, it still looks like a top-end car, but you didn't pay anywhere near what everyone else paid for it. Now, the next car on the list is, I had to put this one on here just because it's a risk, but on the flip side of it, the depreciation made it unignorable. It's a Maserati Quattroporte. You can get a Grand Lisso, you can get an SS, a Q4, you can get... On this generation, unfortunately, there's no buyer's guide for the Quattroporte. There is for I think I did the Ghibli. The Quattroporte will come up at some point, but we're talking between 75 and 85% depreciation. Now, I'm going to pull that 85 back, and it was the one I mentioned, 83%, because to get past 83%, I started to have to look for a little bit high mileage. But at the end of the day, it is, of all the cars on this list, the worst performer for brand new price to depreciated. Now, of course, that's because Maseratis do have a bit of a reputation for being a little bit highly strung, needing a lot of care, and when they decide they're broken, they are broken and they're going to cost you a lot of money. But on the flip side of that, they're fantastically designed. They look like something special, and ultimately, a Maserati for a lot of people has something about, driving in some mountains of Italy about it that perhaps the others are more German Autobahn related. This kind of has that style that maybe some of the others miss. Now, it hasn't got the sort of quiet style that you're going to get on the Jaguar. It is a little bit louder than that. But at the end of the day, a Quattroporte, for many people, is still a very special car. And there'll be people out there that love Maseratis and just couldn't touch a brand new one because they cannot stand that level of depreciation. But at 8 years old, if you can find one, especially one that's had some money spent on it, find the right one, and you're probably getting the bargain of a century there, if it doesn't cause you any problems. And it is an if. Now, the one thing I would say, when I did the Maserati guide for the Ghibli, I actually said in that guide, there's a horrible reputation that Maseratis had. And you could see in the comments, comment after comment of, they all break, why would anyone buy these? People are mad if they buy them. But then owners started to comment. And a lot of the owners said, actually, newer Maseratis, for them, yeah, it cost them a little bit of money. They didn't go into it with their eyes closed, but it hadn't broken in half. It hadn't failed them. And if anything, it had similar running costs to some of the other cars they'd had, which were just sort of, the crop of usual suspects, if you like. So I wouldn't be as scared as I once would, but maybe I'm speaking out of turn. Maybe at 10 years old, they're just no good. It'd be great to hear some owners step in on that one. Now, this one is a repeat, this next car. It had to come into this this conversation of luxury. It was in the SUV list, but it's had to come across. It's the Range Rover. L405 generation Range Rover. In an autobiography specification, this is Mercedes S-Class specification of a car. This is competing with the very, very top of luxury. And yet, It's actually in these highest spec models, like a long wheelbase autobiography or one of the special edition models, that you're going to get just depreciate. I don't know that they can depreciate much more than this. In the UK, 70 says 75%, depending if you go for a V8 diesel or the V8 petrol. In the US, 82%. Just wild depreciation. And of course, same conversation as the Maserati. There'll be 100 million people out there that will say, oh, they're all break in half next week, so you shouldn't buy it. Well, you know, listen to owners. And the one thing that really gave me confidence to sort of put this in the list was owner feedback on the L405 buyer's guide. And currently I'm actually working on an extended guide for the L405. And the interesting thing that caught me there is, of course, there's lots of things to worry about. These cars have so many things put on them. There's a lot that can go wrong. But ultimately, as I've been going further and further into what owners are saying, it's quite remarkable how many people have had 4, 5, 6, 8 years ownership, and they've done their servicing. They've not been blind to the running costs. Anything it's needed, they've done, but they've not had a single issue. And that, it says something, especially because if you're thinking any of these cars, maybe save for the Lexus at the very, very top, maybe apart from that one, if you think any of these cars will be reliable at 8 years old, I think this is the wrong type of car for you. Big luxury cars depreciate heavily because they have the running cost of brand new, but you can buy them at a bargain. The idea you can now be picking them up for what a brand new Volkswagen Golf would cost you. Okay, it's not going to have a warranty like a Volkswagen Golf, and it's not going to be as efficient, and it's not going to be as solidly, to run around in today, but special car. I'd seriously consider it if I was looking in this list. Now, there are 2 jokers in the pack. These, of all cars at the moment, the entire Mercedes EQS range, particularly because Mercedes have said, yeah, we're going to do a whole new range, actually. We've changed our mind on on our current sort of plan for electrification. We're going in a different direction, and we're going to launch, I think it's something like 45 new cars over the next few years. And it's leaving cars like this in a bit of a quagmire between, well, what are they then? Are they going to just be forgotten about by the manufacturer in 4 or 5 years' time? Or are they a good used buy? Or were they never a good car? Well, the used market's deciding that right now. But the great thing for you is, if you're willing to take a chance, you can get basically a 3 or 4 year old car that's well kept. Doesn't feel like anything much past a 6-month-old car if it's well kept and it's not done the mileage. Now, I've stepped in some cars that are 3 years old, that have done 100,000 miles, and they feel like they're 15 years old. But I've also got in 5, 6, 7-year-old cars that have been immaculately kept by the owner, just run around for errands and weekend work. And you get in and you think, wow, if I changed the number plate on this and polished it up, most people wouldn't be able to tell the difference of a brand new one to this one. So there are some really, really well kept one of these, and they are cheap. The next joker in the pack, you can't get it in the UK. And in the USA, they discontinued it. And I think it's because they discontinued it. They still sell it in China, which helps for getting parts for this car. But I think that's why it's so cheap. And a lot of people have just forgotten about it. It's the Cadillac CT6 Platinum specification, 2017 to 2020. So you can get an 8-year-old one. 78% of the value of these is gone. And that means if you're out there in the US and you think, no, Cadillac to you is just as good as a Mercedes or anything else, and the badge will hold, the same level of mystique or whatever as some of the others, these are nearly 80% off for an 8-year-old one. And looking at the ones that I looked at, they were all nice to look at. Were they well kept? You'd have to check the service history and see what the owner's been doing. But really, this could be, if you're in the US, a bit of a bargain. Now, if you'd rather have an SUV, we've done this exact same list for SUVs, and it's worth checking out next. But there's a few more videos just like this one coming up soon. So if you've enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.